Hello, everyone. This is Kelly Covert, and welcome to At Home with Symphoria. I have one of my favorite people in the whole world today, Ernie Muzquiz, who's a percussionist with Symphoria, and he's at home and wants to welcome you into his home today. Hi, Ernie.
Good afternoon. It's actually afternoon here, isn't it?
Did I say good morning? Yes, good afternoon.
I say that because most of my audience is in Texas, and it's only 11:30 there.
hmm I think that you underestimate yourself if you think that most of your audience is in Texas.
Well, that's where I grew up, and if there's 100 people watching or will watch, at least 80 of them are from Texas because of my relatives, and that's where I grew up. A small
hmm
town named Moore, Texas, like Mary Tyler Moore.
Excellent, excellent. And then you end up here in Syracuse where we have snow on April 16th. How do you feel about that?
It doesn't bother me at all. I'm a musician. I'm an indoor person. I don't go out in the woods. I don't go hunting. I don't go skiing. I just sit indoors and practice. At my age, I still practice every day. I want my colleagues to know that.
hmm Well, so speaking of practicing, what are you practicing right now?
Well, let me start with a piece we're going to play next year. Hopefully, things will return to normal. Hopefully, we'll be able to play to live audiences in one format or another. I've envisioned many different scenarios to make that possible, but obviously nobody has asked me what my ideas are. But for me, as a keyboard player, because that's my specialty as a percussionist, a lot of people in Texas know me as a drummer, but I rarely bang the drums anymore. I usually play keyboards, xylophone, glockenspiel, vibraphone, marimba. So what I'm practicing for next year already is Copland's Appalachian Spring. And it has a xylophone passage in it that it's virtually impossible to play. Both hands play 16th notes at the same time in tandem. And depending on how fast the maestro decides to take the piece, it could be beyond the ability to stay up with it, playing 16th notes with one hand, with both hands at the same time. And one hand in one passage has to articulate an arpeggio, and the other one at the same time has to go scale-wise, kind of like this. So it's one of those that you just practice until you're blue in the face and then hope for the best. And
hmm
I played it before 2 or 3 times, but again, and my colleagues should take note, at my age, now that I've played most of the great pieces, I say most because I think virtually all of them, the standard orchestral literature, it doesn't get easier, it gets harder. And that's why I still practice and I don't take things for granted. And so that's on my daily practice list. And I have a list here of my, how do I, here, I don't know if you can read it. There's my daily dozen. It's actually a baker's dozen because there's 13 of them, of the pieces that I practice every day. And believe it or not, I have all of these in my head. In other words, I don't need the music. As people should know, percussionists oftentimes do not play from beginning to end like most string players do. We sit there and wait, count rests, and then play maybe 2 or 3 measures, and then we're out. So it's not so hard to memorize that, and I usually memorize them. And so that daily dozen is all those pieces there. I would not want to be caught off guard if they showed up all of a sudden. If there's a program change or something, I'd be in big trouble if I didn't know them. So I play them at least every other day. And so the original question was, what am I practicing now? I practice the Copland Appalachian Spring, because for me, in terms of technical difficulty, that'll be the biggie. And my daily, if I can elaborate a little bit, I don't know if I'm going overtime already.
Well, this may be your only question if you keep going, but it's good.
Well, for me, this is important because
Yes, let's hear it.
I have 10 pieces. They're all basically one pagers that I practice every day by reading them. Now, a lot of people, when they listen to a marimba player say, play these solos, they don't notice that there's no music stand. Most marimba players and keyboard players play from memory. So up till a year or so ago, everything I played was, when I played solos and recitals and things like this, I would memorize them. because you have to look down at the bars. It's hard enough to hit them when you're looking at them because they're sweet spots and they're dead spots. You can't hit them just anywhere. So that's a problem right there. And so for me to be able to hit them squarely in the sweet spots, I got to be looking at them. So next time people, you or anybody watches a marimba player on YouTube or wherever, notice whether or not they have a music stand. In most cases, they will not because they have it in their heads. So my bucket list, my biggest bucket list item, other than trying to survive the pandemic, is to learn to read solos in performance. Now you'll recall that a couple of weeks ago I did that Bach A minor flute partita that I did that you broadcast, and I don't know if anybody noticed, but I was reading it. It was my first time ever reading a solo per se in public, and so for me it was a big risk. And so here's 10 pieces, starting with a piece that you're probably familiar with if you can read it. It's the Telemann Fantasia in F sharp minor.
Also a flute piece.
Yes. And so, of course, we as percussionists borrow from all the other instruments because up till the beginning of the 20th century, there was virtually nothing written as solo literature for marimba or xylophone. And so we borrow. And this is one of the ones that I play almost every day. It's very, very difficult because of all the arpeggiation in it. So that's one. Here's one by a composer named Muzquiz that also was written originally for violin. And here's one that's just the right-hand part to a piece by a composer named Don't. It's a funny name, Don't, D-O-N-T. I'm sure it's pronounced differently because it's Viennese, and probably the T is silent. And so here's one that I play almost every day, La Scala de Siete. I'm hoping to impress Eduardo someday, our fantastic oboe player from Chile. And I practice almost every day and reading it, not memorizing. If I memorize it, I could probably nail it without too much trouble. But since it's all kind of scale-wise, very few flats or sharps, it's quite difficult. So anyway, here's 10 of them that I practice almost every day reading. And my another bucket list item is to perform these someday in a recital, all reading, where I announce that I'm going to read the whole recital rather than memorize it, which will be
Well, Ernie, we're going to hold you to that now that you have all this extra practice time while you're at home. You can share with us the date of this recital, the impending recital.
I certainly will do that.
All right, fantastic. So it's hard to imagine you doing anything else besides being a percussionist, especially after you shared with us about your practice routine, which is inspiring to me. But if you could be anything else, what do you think you would be?
All right. Well, the first thing I would say is that I would want to be a writer because that's one of my hidden passions. I love good writing and I like to read it. I like good prose, P-R-O-S-E. And to me, it's not so much the story, but how it's written. If there's melody and harmony in the way a composer, like an author writes. So that's what I would want to be, but not to write novels or nonfiction or anything else, because I have no ideas. I know how to write a complete sentence. I'm pretty good with grammar if I proofread my stuff. But what I would really want to be, because I think, is to write book reviews. When I read the New York Times book review section or the Times Literary Supplement from London, I'm just riveted. That writing it's just very exciting to me. And I would love to be able to, that would keep me reading a lot of stuff and then doing a critique on it. So that would be what I would do. That would be the first thing I would think of.
That sounds like fun. Noemi is curious to know who your favorite writer is.
Well, there's politically correct authors you could mention, but I would have to say that the one I have been most impressed with, because I think he's definitely a virtuoso with words, would be John Updike. The 4 rabbit books were just, to me, I read all of them. They came 10 years apart. And so he's probably my hero, and I got to see him in person once here in Syracuse. He came to do a lecture. Recently, Joyce Carol Oates, who went to Syracuse University, graduated valedictorian when they used to designate valedictorians. She's written about 60 novels in her own name and novels in pseudonyms. And I got to meet her once, got her autograph. And they're just amazing with words, the vocabulary, the syntax, and everything else. So those would be the two. I belong to the James Joyce Society, and we're slowly but slogging through Ulysses. I've done about 3/4 of it, and that's another item on my bucket list. And I've read Cervantes because I read in Spanish. I read almost as well in English as in Spanish as I do in English now because I've been working on it. Because as most of you know, I'm bilingual, or if you consider Tex-Mex a real language, it's what I grew up talking. But I've been trying to improve my Spanish, and so I've read a lot of the big novels, Garcia Marquez and Losa. I'm drawing a blank here. But anyway, making a point that I read almost every day in English and in Spanish. We try to keep both of them going. And
I feel as I listen to your practice routine and to your reading routine, I think to myself, my goodness, what am I doing all day? I need to learn how to keep up with my friend Ernie.
Hey, I forgot to mention, I'm pointing around, see the sign behind me? Let me see. Welcome. I'm welcoming you and all my colleagues, all my relatives back in Texas and other places to my house. So I hope you can read that welcome sign.
And we can, Ernie, and we thank you for that. So I know that you had a personal beef with this question because you don't think that any pleasure should be guilty, but I'm going to ask you anyway. What is your favorite guilty pleasure right now?
I'm sorry. Did you ask a question? I didn't hear
it. What is your favorite guilty pleasure? Ernie is, how do you say it, a vinophile?
I think we're having a problem with the connection. I can't hear you.
Is it because you're eating and drinking?
Actions speak louder than words.
Yes. So a little bit of carbs, a little bit of wine.
I have to tell you, since March 16th, today is April 16th, obviously. It's been a month now since we started canceling concerts. On March 16th, it was a Monday. That was the first concert we canceled. And since then, I've been basically hibernating in the house, practicing and trying to get things done. And fortunately, my wife, Alice, does all the grocery shopping. So the only time I go out is I go through the drive-up window at Dunkin' Donuts. So I guess I should feel guilty about that.
Well, there are worse things for sure. Eat a donut for me. That's what I will say. So like you mentioned, we have a great season lined up for 2021, 2020, 2021. And we're all really looking forward to being back on stage. And you mentioned that you're already practicing your Copeland Appalachian Spring. That's something I'm really looking forward to also. What else are you most looking forward to playing next season?
Well, being one of the oldest members of Symphoria, I am understandably perhaps the most conservative or among the most conservative. And I've noticed in looking at all our programs for next year that there seems to be an embedded festival, kind of like we did Rachmaninoff this past year.
Yes.
Which for me was the end all. Uh-oh.
You're good. Can you hear me still?
Yeah, it went blank there for a second.
Oh, yeah, you're good.
Must have been something I said. But so I've noticed that we have kind of a mini festival embedded in the program. I've heard nobody talk about, but it's important to me because it's one of the composers that goes right to my heart, and that's Tchaikovsky. We're doing 3 of his biggest works: the Violin Concerto, the first Piano Concerto, and probably one of my very favorite symphonies in terms of sheer excitement and profound passion, the Pathétique, this Symphony number 6. And so I'm looking forward to that, all 3 of those. I hope we can get them all in.
Well,
And
and Natasha Perimsky, who played all four of the Rachmaninoff concertos with us this year, she will be back to perform the Tchaikovsky Piano Concerto, and I know she is really looking forward to that.
yeah, she was pretty amazing playing all four Rachmaninoff concertos from memory, and it was just an astounding feat, I think. And I have to mention also the Shostakovich 11th, which everybody's been mentioning as one of one of the pieces they're most looking forward to. I happened to be here, some 30 years ago when Maxim Shostakovich, Dmitri's son, came here to guest conduct, and that was a symphony he conducted. So I have a great appreciation for it, a great memory from that, and also because it happens to be extremely difficult. There's just so much noodling around, but it's very effective, and so definitely I'm looking forward to that. But Tchaikovsky, those three big Tchaikovskys, I think that it's just my opinion that the symphony should give a discount for people who would buy those three concerts, and that might feel the same way I do about Tchaikovsky.
Yeah, or maybe you pay extra because they're all so amazing.
Right, they'd definitely be worth it.
So let's get on to our lightning round questions. These are provided by Arvilla Wendland and her kids, Mitchell and Nora Rovit. Mitchell and Nora, I'm going to give them a shout out because they have been watching every single one of these interviews and have been like adding and asking questions. And so thanks to Mitchell and Nora for these lightning round questions. So Ernie, here it is. As few words as possible. First thing that comes to your mind. You ready?
I'm ready.
What have you been doing the most since you had to start social distancing?
I've been doing a lot of things, but what I'm trying to do is catch up on the arrangements that I am doing, because I've done a lot of arrangements for a keyboard percussion ensemble. And when I started engraving music, people found out that I did it, so I've been doing it for other composers. So now I have time to do my own, and that's probably what I do the most.
Excellent.
And reading more, obviously.
Reading and practicing, it sounds like, too. You know, it's a top 3 for you. What is your favorite sweet? Although maybe you've given that away already.
Well, kind of. Although donuts are not my favorite sweet, but I like anything made with dough. When I want dessert, it usually has something to do made with wheat dough. Yes. So cake, carrot cake especially. I'll stop there.
Okay, carrot cake. I think that's a good one and seasonally appropriate for this this time of year. What is the naughtiest thing your cats have ever done?
Besides throw up. Well, I have 2 female cats, and they live like princesses. They have everything they need. They have a fairly big house to wander around in, but occasionally they fight, and we have to break them up because they go from, lying around together, sometimes snuggling up together, and then they get into these little spats, and seems to come out of nowhere. So that's probably the worst thing they do.
It's hard to have 2 princesses in the house, isn't it? If you could play a non-percussion instrument, what instrument would you choose?
Guitar.
Guitar. And what is your favorite percussion instrument to play? Or actually, what percussion instrument is most fun to play?
Well, in the last 10 years or so, since we became Symphoria, I've been playing a lot of timpani. And as I've told you in previous interviews, there's a certain feel to playing timpani. You feel powerful, and you play a lot more. You don't count as many rests as a typical percussionist does, and you don't sit around waiting to play as much. And you generally play in all the pieces. Timpani is generally in every piece, whereas percussion, sometimes I go out and sit in the audience and listen to you guys play.
Okay, excellent. And last question, Mitchell really wants to know the answer to this. Elton John or Billy Joel?
Well, I just saw the Elton John movie, and it was pretty amazing. So I would say, even though Billy Joel has that New York state of mind, I appreciate both of them. But if I had to pick one right now, I would say Elton John.
Elton John. Well, Ernie, if I had to pick one, it would be you. Thank you for being you, and thank you for all you've done and all your years of service here in symphonies in Syracuse, Symphoria, and the Syracuse Symphony. We appreciate you. And to all who are watching, thanks for hanging out with us today at home. And we will see you on Monday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern. Have a great weekend.